I want to share with you an interesting article I just read about David Osmond and his experience with multiple sclerosis. David Osmond is a singer and entertainer of the famous Osmond family, and he and his father both have multiple sclerosis. And it was very interesting to read this article because I actually saw David Osmond once. It was about 10 years ago, around 2014. I was a fellow training to be a multiple sclerosis specialist at the time, and I was at a conference put on by Don Tykson, and it was a conference that brought clinical people like me, the doctors, together with the researchers, the PhDs, and we got to learn from each other. And it was very enlightening, and they also had an award show associated with, I believe, the National MS Society, and they were giving out different awards for charity and different accomplishments, and David Osmond was volunteering as the host, and he was incredible, so entertaining, born to be in show business, so dynamic and formidable, cracking jokes left and right on the fly. And of course, this is a little bit of a posh event. You know, there are a lot of PhDs and doctors there and kind of high-level charity administrators, and he just sort of rode that line of being a little bit inappropriate, but not too inappropriate. And I remember his performance to this day, and he just looks so good on the stage, so formidable. But of course, some people are suffering silently, so it's interesting to read about his experience. So this is an interview. It's a long transcript. I won't read the whole thing, just a little bit, and I'll make a few comments. In honor of Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month, Fresh Living host David Osmond sat down with Mary Nichols to shed light on the disease through personal experience. Osmond was diagnosed at the early age of 26 years old. His father, Alan Osmond, of the Osmonds, had also lived with MS. So the average age of diagnosis of MS is 30, so 26 is fairly typical. He goes on the article to say that he has relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. This is the form where you can have attacks get dramatically worse, but then you may improve afterwards, though it can be quite debilitating in certain instances, but overall has a better prognosis than what his father has, which apparently is primary progressive multiple sclerosis, the form where people tend to slowly get worse over time but are less likely to have significant improvement. The condition causes scarring and damage on the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. Symptoms present differently for everyone. David's manifested as extreme pain with immobility and diminished eyesight at its worst. David said that he's changed his entire lifestyle since being diagnosed, learning more about his body than he ever had before. And so he shares a little bit about his experience. 26 years old, and I was diagnosed. And I thought I knew everything about MS. I was in complete denial about it, to be honest with you. Your dad had MS, and I thought my dad still has MS. Yeah, 37 years. He has it too, to this point. But I, within a few months of my first symptoms of crushing pain in my toes that moved up to my legs and eyes diminishing, I was in a wheelchair, if you can believe that, of all things within a few months. So he had a very aggressive onset of multiple sclerosis, a bad attack, and of course, he did recover significantly, at least in terms of mobility. And certainly when I saw him, which is quite a bit after his diagnosis, he looked superficially good, but he goes on to say that he had chronic pain, a sort of burning pain in his body throughout his entire life, along with other symptoms. I'd been worse off in that short moment of time. I thought there's no way that this is what I had. There's something else going on, and boy, I was ignorant. Even though that I'd been surrounded by it my entire life and learned more about what MS really is in those early years that I had my entire life watching my father. And that makes sense, that living it is definitely different than watching it. And the interviewer asks, it's different in everyone. MS is an unpredictable autoimmune disease of the central nervous system. Neurodegeneration is happening in your wiring, the brain, and the spine. All the stuff that tells you to think, to move, to see, to act, all your organs, all the system, it's all going through that. MS, if you think about it, multiple sclerosis means many scars, right? So there's scarring and damage that happens in the myelin sheath in your central nervous system. And ultimately, a lot of people, it stops you from moving. It's like a short circuit in a wire of your phone charger when it just doesn't quite work. Or maybe it's just dead completely. And he goes on and talks a little bit about his own treatment and what he receives. And he explains that he's currently taking a medication that is a hospital-based treatment that he receives every 6 months. He's most likely referring to a B-cell depleting drug such as Ocrevus or rituximab or Briumvi, and these are drugs that kill B lymphocytes, the white blood cells that make antibodies. They're considered to be higher efficacy drugs for multiple sclerosis, very good at stopping attacks, very good at stopping new lesions on the MRI. They may have some benefit at stopping slow progression if it's occurring, but he may or may not be experiencing that. But these drugs can cause infusion reactions, rash, hives, itching, shortness of breath during the treatment, and they're also immunosuppressant medications, and some people can get infections, particularly with long-term continuous use of these medications. He does not talk about his side effects of the medication. So he goes on in the interview to talk about all his subtle symptoms that are ongoing, and that he just tries to keep a really good attitude. If you saw him, both in the interview, they do include a video in this article, and when I saw him in person, he looks like a very happy person. He doesn't look like someone who's suffering, and he explains this is part of the Osmond culture. We just grew up like that. You put on a proud face, you try to look happy, you try to make other people happy and entertain other people. And he talks about a little bit about his experiences with other medications. He mentions that he took a once-a-month treatment, which is most likely Tysabri, a different high-efficacy treatment. He's taken some of the pills for multiple sclerosis. He doesn't give the exact clinical details of what happened with those other medications. One thing in the article that was interesting is he talks about a quote from Dr. Seuss and a little bit about his philosophy. When you start to feel sad, when you start to feel sour and blue, and when you start to get mad, you should do what I do. Just tell yourself, Ducky, you're really quite lucky. Some people are much more, oh, ever so much more, oh, muchly, much, much more unlucky than you. So he tries to put things in perspective that although he had bad luck in terms of multiple sclerosis, some people have it worse than him, other things in his life are going well. He tries to keep a broad perspective. And I gotta be honest, being here, doing television every day in the corporate world, meeting people all the time, doing relationships on stage, traveling, touring, I have a unique opportunity to meet a lot of people. The one thing I know is every single day I meet somebody that I can't imagine changing places with, right? The cards that I've been dealt, it may not be a great hand, but I have to play this one because I know the other side of the coin. Life is hard. There's a lot of people struggling. Unfortunately, one of the leading causes of death for MS is suicide. Yeah, the mental toll and the taxation of that alone is brutal. It changes your life and the ones around you. Because I have MS, it means that my kids have MS, my wife does, and I cannot do this without them. And it's definitely true that one person having MS affects everyone. It affects the whole family. And he acknowledges that you can't do it alone. And I think that there are some people can do it alone, maybe if they don't have significant disability from multiple sclerosis, or they have a very strong stoic demeanor and good luck with the disease overall. But most people at some point with the disease, they're going to need a support system. And I think that he's very smart to reach out and create and build and lean on his support system. So it's interesting to hear his philosophy. I'd be interested to hear your experiences. Have you ever felt that even if you don't feel well, maybe you're suffering significant pain or other invisible symptoms of multiple sclerosis, you decide to put on a proud face, put on a smile for other people, or if that doesn't work for you? And what do you think about his philosophy with the broad perspective? And do you try to reach out to other people to help you with the disease? And let me know if you have ideas for other videos.